Joining us now on the Bobby B Sports Tech Hotline is the one and only Joe Lunardi. He's got a new book out called Bracketology, March Madness, College Basketball, and the Creation of a National Obsession. Joe, how are you, buddy? And I'm sure this is a great book. Can't wait to read it. Does anybody ever get offended when they're like the, first team out or first team on the bubble, that kind of stuff? Do they ever get a hold of you and say, hey, why did you say that?
Well, it hasn't happened today, but it happens most days this time of year. And I guess, guys, the way to look at it is, there's 363 teams in Division I. So that means at any moment in time, 295 of them are going to hate my guts.
Mm-hmm.
And there isn't really much I can do to change the math. So you got to roll with it.
All right, spell this rumor if you could. I've always believed that the selection committee gets in there and they try to throw all the bias that they have out the door, where they went to college, where they live. But the one bias that continues to sneak into that room, at least from my vantage point, is the bias of trying to create ratings with the selections that they pick. Is that true or false, Joe Lunardi?
I know I'm in the minority on this, but I am 110% convinced that it is false, and I'll tell you why. I do brackets pretty regularly, like every day, and in doing so, I follow every single bracketing rule that they have to follow when they do their real one. It is close to impossible, and sometimes actually impossible, to follow all of the bracketing rules and also play matchmaker. The reason why we have what appear to be matchmaker-type games in the tournament is because there are 67 games in the tournament. It can't help but happen that there's going to be a storyline or somebody coaching against his former school or, the mentor, former assistant deal or, or Rick Pitino against this school or that school. I mean, Rick, he's coaching up places. He can't help but play former school. So, I just – and they also don't have a lot of time to do it because the actual bracket and the pairings is the very last thing that gets done. I'll tell you what. I end up with storylines in my mock brackets at times. I go, I didn't even know I was doing that. Because you're just trying to get the seeds right and put teams in places where they're allowed to go.
Joe, let me ask you about University of Connecticut. Early on in the season, they went 14-0. They were great. How much has their standings and where they're situated in your bracketology? You have them right now at a 4 seed out west in the Albany bracket to start. But how much has that kind of fluctuated? And were they in some other bracket before this?
Yeah, they've moved around because, their league season hasn't been as stellar as their non-conference performance, where they beat any and all comers, including, the number one overall seed in the committee's reveal, Alabama. The Big East schedule was a little stacked against them at the start. It softened up here down the stretch, so they're looking better for the most part. I still think, A, they're incredibly dangerous and good enough playing April. And B, I thought they were undervalued a week ago when the committee gave us its top 16. I thought UConn not being in that group was a miss. Understanding that I don't have a vote and they don't care what I think. And I understand that, but if they play well here down the finish and let's say reach or win the Big East championship game, I have a hard time thinking that the overall quality of their season and the teams they've beaten isn't going to give them at least a top 4 seed, and that would give them almost certainly Albany as their first weekend destination, which has obviously some built-in advantages for Husky Nation there, and a very good shot of being in the East region, and if they advance the second weekend, being at Madison Square Garden, and we know that that's a great advantage over the years for UConn.
What about the conference as a whole, top to bottom, Big East versus Big 12 versus Big 10? What kind of pedigree do you put on their rankings because of the conference that they come from?
I think the Big 12 is clearly the best this year. I think that I could throw a blanket over the SEC, the Big 10, and the Big East in terms of other Sweet 16 and Final Four contenders, with maybe a slight edge to the SEC as two because of Alabama and Tennessee being, top 10 type teams. But from a bracketology standpoint, the Big East has done a great job of separating its top from its bottom. So the 5 teams that are going to make it, UConn, Marquette, Xavier, Providence, and Creighton, they can all play into the second weekend because they're probably all going to be a single-digit top half of the bracket teams who will be favored in their first-round game.
Talking to Joe Lunardi from ESPN. He is a bracketologist. He is one of the best in the business. He's got a new book out called Bracketology, March Madness, College Basketball, and the Creation of a National Obsession. Let me ask you about how many teams that have been knocked off that have gotten into the number 1 slot. I mean, is that, I don't want to say does it have anything to do with NIL, but I mean, that was the question I was kind of getting to. Is having some money keeping some of these kids at home, and is it creating more parity amongst these local colleges like the Houstons and the Alabamas and the Purdues?
Well, Houston's been great for a number of years now. Their last 3 tournaments have been Elite 8, Sweet 16, Final Four. So there's not much left for them except to win it all on the last night. I think in the case of Purdue, they've generally built the same way, which is to get older and stay older, and that hasn't changed. Alabama, yeah, I mean, they have the best freshman, one of the top 5 players in the country in Brandon Miller. Obviously, he's been in the news for more than basketball of late. I suspect he isn't playing for pizza money. I don't know that. But, yeah, I don't think we've seen the effects of NIL to a great extent in terms of rankings yet, but we're certainly going to moving forward.
Do you put any weight on those teams that have had a core group of guys that have been there for maybe 2 seasons, 3 seasons?
I think we've seen in the tournament that it's pretty helpful.
Right.
The one-and-done based teams have not done as well in recent years. Heck, a couple years ago, Duke and Kentucky, who were kind of at the vanguard of that movement for so long, both missed the tournament in the same year, just 2 years ago, which should be impossible. And the teams that played for the championship that year in the bubble, Gonzaga and Baylor, were like the oldest teams in the country in terms of roster continuity. So, yeah, I think it matters. I think generally a 23-year-old peak athlete is going to be bigger, stronger, faster than an 18 or a 19-year-old. It's just kind of the nature of physiology, I guess. Although it's so far in the past for me now, I don't remember whether I was faster at 19 or 23. I suspect I was equally slow at both. But, given the choice, I think coaches would say older preferred.
Right now, in your mind, who are like the top 3 teams that we should be watching for? Who do you like?
I think they're the 3 teams right at the top of the rankings in the bracket in whatever order you want. Alabama, Houston, and Kansas. And if I actually had to bet a mortgage payment on who's going to win it all, ideally, yours, Dibs, not mine, I would go with Houston. I think that they've added an element of explosiveness, and they have a couple of great freshmen to go with an older core. And somehow that storyline of Houston cutting down the nets in Houston which is where the Final Four is being played, I just kind of feel it playing out that way.
And they have a really great coach. Now, we're kind of used to that team as well just because of the AAC days here in Yukon country. But what about some teams people aren't really used to that, man, they've had a great season. They're not going to be denied. They might not be they might not even be top 8 in their bracket. But who is one of those upset bunches that you think is just brewing, ripe for some tournament wins that nobody else is going to see?
I'll give you St. Mary's, who we saw the other night against Gonzaga. They've split the season series. Florida Atlantic is good, and a couple years ago we saw Oral Roberts as a 15 beat Ohio State the 2 and get to the Sweet 16. Well, they're back and they're just as good, maybe better. And I'll give you a team that can absolutely win at least in the first round if they make it. Not too far from y'all, and that would be Yale out of the Ivy League.
Whoa.
Nice.
Whoa.
How about that?
Okay.
We like to hear that.
Yeah, I do like
Local
that.
team like that.
I think we called this playing to the home crowd.
There you go. Selling
Brilliant.
some books.
Brilliant. Joe, as always, great to have you on the show. We appreciate it. Good luck with the new book.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Hey, thanks a lot.
All right. Joe Lunardi, everybody from ESPN, expert on bracketology. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back on the Rob Dibble Show with Ben Darnell after this.